Hey, it's Puueds. Can you tell the difference? They may look very different, but don't be fooled. They're both called the ship. Wait, what?
This is not your average episode, but instead I'm exploring one of my levels. Today it's on Soar, which is my first raid and surprisingly an epic at that. Just to introduce it, it's a medium demon by me that puts a lot of emphasis on the ship game mode and being more freeform with its gameplay. From the level name alone, you soar through a bunch of locales made of an extremely simple art modern style, and said locales include a bootleg Rico Harbor and Oceanland trademark. Despite looking very basic even to what I make nowadays, the level has a lot of history to it, whether that be me taking years to get this off the ground and be finished, to being the first real attempt at animation myself. Now, why am I doing this?
I just felt like it.
Soar was released on July 11, 2022, and it was met with pretty good praise. It got a vibrant upload which I did not
Wait,
expect.
what the
I woke up at 7 AM that day just to be met with 20 pings on Discord that were congratulating me on the video. My heart was pounding not just because I was so excited, but because I got 6 hours of sleep that day. I would not forget how bewildered I was when writing my comment on his video, and I'm disappointed that I cannot edit to fix the 10 billion mistakes while writing. But anyways, this level is generally well liked, but I don't really get it at all. You know that thing where you make something and you think it's alright, but when you show it off to your friends they think it's cool as all hell? Yeah, I've never felt that harder here than with any of my other levels. But why? Well, let's start all the way back to when I did literally nothing for 6 years, aka the period from 2016 where I released Overdrive to 2022 where I finally released Soar. Overdrive was released on 30th October 2016, just one day before Halloween. This level was really in the spooky spirit by scaring you into thinking that this level would get verified. The level was for C1997 Extreme Demon Creator Contest, and it was to make extreme demons that weren't based on hell. We had so many of them back then and everyone was just sick of it. Now we have even more of them and they're even more popular. Okay, there is the upcoming Among Us Sus by Voxycat and more though. Little did I know that that would be the last finished level from me for a good long while, mainly because I was more interested in either watching YouTube videos or playing Team Fortress 2 or just dealing with high school. I actually had way more hours in Team Fortress 2 than in Geometry Dash for a good couple of years, until last year when I passed it while building either Pulse or Swagger. There weren't actually attempts to actually finish a solo. Intelligence was a memory level with a lot of emphasis on moving block design to be challenging. To be fair, everyone was doing that back then. Ultra Drive is a sequel to Overdrive, which I subsequently gave up on because it got pretty boring to build on pretty fast. And honestly, looking at this, fair enough. Deemstar is another extreme demon that I actually finished in 2024. I really liked Spectre and Woogie's style back then, and at the time Stormfly was getting pretty popular and so was Sonics who went by the name of Deem. If you were there, you may have known some of the controversies, but we won't get into that. For some reason I decided to name it Deemstar, and I still don't understand why. Futuristic is a Future Demonist remake. I did remember why I built this, it was just because I really liked Majako's stuff and I was in my 1.9 phase. This really looks good for its time and honestly I just wish I kept building on this. Cane Throw was another level that I actually finished but never released because I'm bad. It's a remake of Swing Squad which was made by Zobris, Gyron, Havoc and Orion, and honestly some parts don't hold up that well, but definitely others do. And well, if I release this today, maybe it could have gotten a rate. I'm still pretty proud of this, even if I never released it. Maybe I should one day if I ever get a lot better at the game. Witness is a level inspired by Outlast and it uses the song Secret Box. There was actually animation planned for the intro which would have been 20 seconds long and Patrick saying Witness over and over. I don't know man. So this would have been Swagger but Murphy McSwaglin gets hired at the asylum. Future Frenzy is another ambitious solo that had the base of Soar but for a city theme. I actually got pretty far into this, but due to a save file glitch, I lost some of the deco. I did recreate it better, but the psychological damage was done. Waluigi World is a level name that is actually really cool in concept. It was based on Waluigi Pinball, the infamous track from Mario Kart DS. You would first be on the street, then enter a bar or casino, and then enter the pinball machine and experience the world. It had a cityscape similar to gauntlet, I don't know how to pronounce this, in Mexico, and make it explore the Shroom Bridge and inner machinery. I don't know if I'd ever continue this, but if I guess I have a lot of free time, I might do it. And then Bowser in London. This was a serious project, but I didn't get that far into it. Duning Downtown, Hoodlum Havoc, GLaDOS, Damos, Shredder and Level. These are the most notable attempts at a solo, and honestly, I kinda wish I put more effort into continuing these. I would talk more about these in more detail, but that's for a future video. But what it did give me was the experience to make gameplay to see what works and what doesn't. It also made me realize how bad I am with consistently building. I can have good ideas, but I have no discipline to get things done, which is something I still struggle with today. There's a reason why my levels have 6-month gaps between each other.
Yeah, I just kind of do nothing for 4 months and then I do the rest in 2.
Waterflame is an artist I listen to from time to time. I might be feeling the Geometry Dash EDM or electronic vibes in general, and to my uni friends it's the most niche kind of music they can think of. I remember at this time listening to Frenetic, Body Jammer and Octagon Force and thinking they were the shit. Nowadays they still kinda are, but I don't really listen to them that much. After looking through more of his songs, I thought Welcome Wing was pretty good and used that. I'm not sure what made me like it so much. I think it was the adventurous feel it had while listening. And the video was a ship traveling across the ocean, and okay, honestly, after describing that, yeah, Soar was guaranteed to link the song's concept and the ship game mode really well. This was the first attempt at Soar, which back then went by the name of Welcome Wing. You can tell I ranked 2067 in the originality contest for my university assessments. The gameplay is quite janky. Not bad at all, but just weird. The first part was supposed to be an airport, and the ball part after that was supposed to be inside the conveyor belts that luggage was transported in. And the gameplay just works enough to fit those ideas, but sometimes it feels sluggish or just really random. The first part actually has portals, pads, orbs, and flying structures, which is not there in the version of Soar you see today. The rest of the level actually has the same structure as Soar, from the drop to the intermission to the ocean land trademark to even the ending. Surprisingly, this is one of the few layouts that have actually been completed. Congratulations, Puueds, you may have ranked 2067 in originality, but at least you would have ranked 13,678 in completing things in Geometry Dash.
Thanks, I guess.
And then I quit. I quit mainly because I couldn't really get anything done in the editor, and I was much more interested in Team Fortress 2 than in Geometry Dash. I think I quit for a year, and I assume this because I didn't know who Nepesta was until much later in 2021. I didn't have the passion to keep creating as I did have ideas, but I didn't want to place blocks. It was just way easier to think about it than to actually really make it. What made me come back was deciding to open it up on my phone at school in late 2020 and trying my best to rekindle the deco quality that I had with Waluigi World. Safe to say, emphasis on trying. Wick was a level made purely to figure out how to deco again, and it shows. I don't know what I was thinking when I was making this level. Maybe I was trying to make a good challenge or something? Yeah, I still don't know to this day. The humor of it is strange. And the ending of it is what solidifies this, in my opinion, as a top 75 hardest level. And I had some miscellaneous levels using the default songs because I was really into them at the time. Dry Rinth is supposed to be a non-linear level, and I don't remember much else about it. Hex is a level that consists solely of hexagonal structuring. It's actually pretty interesting, but it's not really fun or intuitive to play, so I may release this, but most likely not. Mega Balls, wait no, it's actually called Dual Things, is a 2-player level that allows you to change the game mode of the player 1 icon using the clicks of the player 2 icon. It's really interesting, but I can't really be bothered to decorate it as it's a Shoxidian clone that's sorta not good. July 1st is a remake of Lunatic Doom Machine by Andromeda, and it's a spoof based off the July 1st video by Philip Onbred. It does the Shoxidian style a lot better, but I lost motivation to decorate this due to having really ambitious plans and not really being able to execute them. This would be a blast to continue, but god damn it, I'm just too busy now, and it's been like 3 years for this level.
After all these failed attempts at a solo and nearing my final years of high school, I decided to look for one of my older levels, and well, I stumbled across the Welcome Wing layout again, and I decided to revamp it because it looks like it had the most potential.
So first off, let's start with what remained the same. The structure and locales of the level outside of the first part being the airport was still the same ideas I had in 2019. There was animation planned from the start as well, from before the drop to before the final stretch to the end screen. I dabbled in planning for animation before as seen with Witness, and the fact that I still do that is still pretty interesting, because god it kinda sucks sometimes. And now we get to the best part of looking back through Soar. I have 16 copies of Soar. Don't ask how, but you can ask why.
I did not trust the server saving system, and myself.
So let's jump right into the progress of making Soar, the greatly named Soar 2 copy. This one is what I remember to be the first actual attempt for decorating, while also building gameplay simultaneously. It is so rough, with only a parallax sand background, and the gameplay is almost the same. There's 2 slopes instead of the relatively simple blocks, and the last few jumps of the cube are more flat. The ball structuring takes inspiration from Shoxidian's summer level, which I think it didn't get released. You can tell I was really inspired by Shoxidian at the time.
Take a shot every time I say Shoxidian.
There's not much else to this copy, so let's move on to Soar 2 WW. Yes, my naming conventions do not follow any logic. I have multiple files of a banana packaging design, where its names have a prefix of a funny, followed by a number. This has more gameplay and a version of the decoration that's pretty close to the final version. It has added 3D, but I took it out due to it looking really visually noisy and being quite unnecessary. Not only that, it has ship gameplay and is actually mostly the same, but the third dual part is taken straight out of the original Welkin Wing layout, just temporarily. I was planning on keeping that, but it wasn't very straightforward, so I just replaced it. The duels in my levels don't have the greatest reputation, and this would have made it more worse. However, the 2 black orbs after that were kept because I liked it subverting your expectations of going up instead of consistently going down. And then there's a whole lot of nothing. And then Soar pedal unfix. I vividly remember this because I made a pedal and then tried to make a connector, but I wasn't bothered to animate the connector going down, so it ended up looking weird. Not weird enough to be deleted, but just weird enough to look weird. So I made a copy. Thankfully, it also shows other progress such as the decorated ball section and the updated third dual part. Did you know that Soar was inspired slightly by Neo design? Surprisingly, yes. And unsurprisingly, I was inspired by Comet Face, who went by Overdeffer at the time. Riot, The Hills Have Eyes, and Luella had influence on the first part despite that influence being pretty small. You can kinda see it with the ball part spikes with those floating circle patterns and the clouds. Soar was not even close to Neo design, but the influence was there. In the end, would you still believe me if I said this was supposed to be a beach?
Yeah.
The trigger management of this is... Okay, how on earth did I manage this? Have fun deciphering this. Thank you 2021 Puueds. You know well that the cube and ball part have no orbs. That was intentional. It was to keep the player grounded and have the energy sort of simmer before the ship. As such, you only do simple jumps and flips, and while it can be kinda boring, it really aligns with the song's tempo and feel in those 2 parts in my opinion. This was inspired by A Stroll by Nagefu, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. I do remember XFX video critiquing the part for having such a random purple pad in there, and that's the reason why this part doesn't have any orbs, pads, or portals. For the drop, you may start to recognize the Fez-like art style taking place. I actually didn't play Fez until way later. It was actually Disaster Piece by Leo F-Team in 2018. Even to this day, you can still see how that level is just ancestral DNA to my levels. The block design would have looked blue and like this, but I decided against it to not blend with the water, and even then I still have problems recognizing what is block design and what isn't. And yes, that one tricky first duel was still there, much to the dismay of most players completing the water gauntlet. And it shows some early block design for the sky part too, which you have a keen eye? This type of block design was reused for Float's drop. I remember making this part while close to my graduation in high school. It was the COVID days and I had graduation after my final exams, which is abnormal but in my opinion fits way more. After all the hard work you celebrate, you don't celebrate before the hard stuff, that sounds like hell. From what I remember when decorating the part, I struggled with making the outlines pop. I was pretty bad with combining colors and I still sorta am. I also removed some cloud blocks in the background to keep it more visually clear, and you can still see them in Vibrant's showcase. There's supposed to be block design in the back, but it's not great about it. As for the gameplay, you can skip a lot of orbs, and it's quite easy to do actually. I didn't want to deal with the touch trigger and also toggling off obstacles when clicking on orbs because that's just not how real life works. The main basis of the level was to be realistic in its design, not in decoration, but just how the world works. In GD, there are arrows pointing you towards where you need to jump, but in real life it doesn't work that way.
What?
When playtesting, I was either gladly thanked for not adding in arrows or was asked if I was going to fill in the air.
Needs more air deco. Nah, that's good enough.
I was also planning to add green plant stems for contrast and to make it more vivid, but man, it didn't really fit, and it just made me wish that Clouds had that, so I had a reason to add it in. I usually leave unused stuff in my levels for people to see, even if the total amount of people that see it is, well, probably at the most single digits. But you can take a look into Soar right now and find some of it. I was playing on a city background before the beach setting took place. I put all the 3D stuff above the level, and unused diagonal rocks for the second part. Now moving on to the port part. As I mentioned before, it was inspired by Rika Harbor from Super Mario Sunshine. I used to play a lot on the GameCube emulator Dolphin. I played a ton of Paper Mario and its mods, Luigi's Mansion, and of course Super Mario Sunshine. Rika Harbor has so much influence on that part, it's pretty funny how little stuff there is that isn't inspired by it. I also reference a few other things in the part such as my friends, Mr. Beth, Lena, Craft IP, Comically, and Voxycat who went by Cheese Nugget at the time, plus G-Storm and an icon of a bee that a group of friends stole. And what up PTY Ltd.
I lent this man my identity for Soar, and I got put in the water gauntlet, and he still hasn't given me any money. Give me my fucking money, you cunt.
And yeah, I think that's about it for the part. Okay, yeah, right, the duels. Yes, Soar was pretty well received, except for the duels and its length. Even when it was released, a few of my friends critiqued the duels for being kinda awkward, and I don't blame them. My mentality when designing these parts was to make the player work for the consistency. You had to straighten yourself out to have a good setup for these parts. Unfortunately, it didn't work as well as I hoped, and now that Soar got put in the water gauntlet where many novices would play it, and that Soar is designed with veterans in mind, you can imagine the response. Do not harass these people, okay? It's okay for people to get mad at a level even if you think it's good, or that their opinion, in your opinion, sucks. Elysione said that if it was a minute shorter and had better duels, it would be a much more enjoyable experience. Now, personally, I heavily disagree for its length. If I wanted it to end earlier, I would have no idea where to end it. Reading some of these comments can be either the most humbling or the most funniest. But the general consensus is, well, from me, lol. The comments before it making it to the water gauntlet are the real ones. Thank you, Sir Haddoken. And also Dansman, and Mythical TG, and Adiel, and Gormuk, and anyone who commented 2 years ago. As I progress, I'm generally going to have less to say because the most interesting stuff to talk about with my levels happen at the start of making it. That's where I'm usually dying the most trying to get the ball rolling. As for the cave part, pretty much anything that you see here was the first attempt at it, and it just stuck until the final release. Ocean Land Station. The most notable thing about this is that when it turns into a warm color scheme, I thought it was the most hypest shit ever, mostly because the song really picks up here. I hope you would agree too, because I still think this.
Go on, pick.
I also remember this part specifically because I was showing this level to one of my high school teachers when I occasionally visit them. It was to my industrial graphics teacher and he did not understand what was going on. Now, Ocean Land. This is in my opinion the second most laziest part made. The most being the part right after. This was because I thought 2.2 would release soon. Around this time I was working on an entry for the World Gauntlet contest, Down Under. That is entirely another thing to dive into, but what I'll say is that the contest ending could mean that 2.2 would be released after. Man, I was so relieved but also bummed out that 2.2 did not release in 2021, thank you RobTop. Now, why do I call this the second most laziest part made? The colours barely represent what I wanted to go for with my Sealand inspiration. It just doesn't really feel industrial enough. Plus, they blend in too well with the ocean. There isn't much detail outside of the block design platforms, and the flag, and the outhouse, other than RobTop being saved by Viprin. And overall, it's just kinda lame. The last part is just kinda there. I remember struggling a lot with pulses here and readability, and if you thought swag was hard to read at times, oh boy.
Other than that, that's really it for the main parts for me to talk about. There's simultaneously a lot and not a lot to talk about, but let's move on to the end screen. This took forever, but not in what you might think. It took really forever, just because I didn't really want to do it.
For some context, I was planning on making the end screen just be your player icon flying and then blasting off. It was planned to be as simple as that so I could finish, but thankfully I decided against that because I'm too stubborn. So I made an entire plan in the level to keyframe the perspective using GD's pulsing objects. And it actually worked. The trigger management in this is still not it though. I remember just stopping after making 4 or 5 frames of the end screen. The reason was that it was just so intimidating. Imagine doing your first animation, in Geometry Dash no less, and it's a perspective animation of your icon flying and blasting off to the sunset. So I put it off for months. Until Dansman and the boys finished Down Under, and the fact that I had an opportunity to go to camp but decided not to. I had a lot more time now that Down Under was finished, and even more to do the animation. So I just said, fuck it, we're making it now. It was difficult, if not tedious. I remember I was dying trying to make the outlines for the ship, and it was still looking off when I was done. You can see it with the cube's 3D perspective. The outlines are not really consistent in thickness as I wanted to scale to cut down on the work. Filling in the frames was just... ugh. I've gotten way better at it now because I've done it numerous times and I can optimize it, but doing it for the first time was just not fun. And the ocean. I actually wanted to animate the ocean rocks in perspective too, but then I realized how much of a pain that would be during my first attempt, so I didn't. It's still a pretty decent animation with a few flaws, but for a first attempt, it's a miracle. I remember after it was done on the 11th of July 2022, I released it at 10:42 PM, right when Mythical TG's internet went down. It was so hype. Another friend asked if he wanted to make the thumbnail for me. I declined, saying I'd make it. I took 6 months to upload the showcase for it. Okay, how on earth did that happen? I was calling with Dansman while watching him beat it, and back then I was so serious about design philosophy with Soar, even all the way up to Float. It's really funny to reflect on this because I don't think as intensely like that anymore. With Calm Frenzy, I just thought, it's just a level, and if it does something cool, that's good enough for me. After he beat it, he said he'd share it with Viprin. I did not believe him, but he did it, and guess what happened in the morning
Wait, what
after?
the
I'm baffled by the speed of Vibrant uploading, or the unfortunate person who had to make the thumbnail in less than 12 hours. You can see my pinned comment having so much information with it. I was filled with so much excitement at 7 AM in the morning. I got 20 pings congratulating the upload, and it was one of the most wholesome and awesome moments of my life. My year 7 self would never believe getting a Vibrant upload in the future. You know, I thought Soar would only get a rate at first. I didn't think it was that good outside of the animation and maybe gameplay, but nope, epic. I still don't believe this either. It got rated 2 weeks later, and there's a screenshot taken by my friend digiself/duck/288266732A.
Sup, McChicken?
You put your phone number as your name?
Of Australia dominating the Hall of Fame tab at the time. As for the thumbnail of the level, I made it all in Procreate using only default brushes, and it looks so good I might have already peaked in making artsy thumbnails like that for my levels right here. Float also follows the same visual stick with this, but we'll get to that when we do. Overall, I'm pretty proud of this one. Except for the fact that I made it 6 months later. I uploaded the store showcase right before releasing Pulse because, yeah, I guess I wasn't feeling like uploading it for those 6 months. Now, that would be the end of Soar's story, but this level went on a funny date with RobTop without my knowledge. It somehow made it into the water gauntlet, and I have absolutely no idea how it got in there. I was pinged in an Australian Discord server and was congratulated for my level making it in, but I really didn't believe it at first. I really thought this was a Ligma setup. Not because I thought it was good enough, but because RobTop wouldn't really add an XL to a gauntlet. It sounds like it'd be pretty tedious to play, and Soar is just long enough to feel like a top 10 challenge to casual players. But it ended up being in there, and I remember it being at 60k downloads before it, and now it's at over 140k. I think the like count just still stayed the same. And ever since then, half of the comment section is now relapsing over Trek or the Water Gauntlet in general. Desmond's top comment was now dethroned. Overall, Soar was a level that's been completely influential in nearly everything I do. Creating wise, I've built more of my pastel cartoonish style that hit its peak in neither swagger or flow. I hope it doesn't go downhill. Career wise, it really got me back into Geometry Dash, and despite being really slow, I'm still trying to work on video and level projects. And if you thought I was going to stop after Float or Calm Frenzy, don't worry, I have 5 or more levels planned. It's more of a question of when it will come out, and I can barely answer that question.
So that was a retrospective on Soar, but that only leaves one thing to address. What's the actual difference between these two? Actually, I think I figured it out. That one just got a ferry, and it probably used a big portal.